And everybody told me, how great Charlie Parker is, and I tried listening to some of the recording, Coco or something, and I just don't get it. It's too fast, too something. And then when I heard him playing the strings and playing these kind of, pop songs in the day, these kind of, love songs, okay, now I get it, because he was playing the melodies, just soaring over it, and then playing all this unbelievable, very intellectually advanced stuff along with it that all worked together. So that was sort of my introduction to the real genius of Bird, which is still, no matter what kind of situation I'm in, what kind of music I'm playing, somewhere in the back of my mind is Bird. It's just so kind of perfect in every way. I find myself going back to that. Just the flow of it, for one thing, and the rhythmic feeling, the whole thing. But, as I was saying, if anyone has anything they want to ask about anything, now's the time. I'm afraid. The first one's always the hardest.
I would like to ask you about fingering.
Yeah.
You are using many different fingering for B flat, or when you are playing B sharp.
Yeah. I have kind of a weird habit that I'm in where sometimes if I'm playing the G sharp, I'll also play the C sharp.
No,
I mean,
B flat.
there's no real reason. I mean, it doesn't really change the timbre that much. You know, it's maybe slightly different, but not really that much. It's more just a habit. I mean, it means that I can go to the harmonic if I want. Or if I want B flat, I can go from G sharp to F. You know, but usually I'm not even thinking. I just, you know, it's a meaningless habit. Yeah, it probably, yeah, it doesn't help in any way. Probably slows me down a tiny bit, which is good. Yeah, you know, and then
The only one with
yeah, I mean
B flat is one?
for B flat, I guess I almost always decide B flat. Yeah, I don't really think about it, you know. Now I've done it for so long. But yeah, you know, you just find fingerings that work for you. And, I mean, you know, same thing with like the altissimo range. I mean, I guess, you know, at the beginning I had some instruction, or you know, maybe I looked at what's that book? Top tones for saxophone, whatever. It's got like a fingering chart. Yeah. I'm sure I checked that out a little bit. You know, but then I just kind of got to where I found some things that worked, at least some of the time. Yeah. And then it was just a matter of spending a lot of time working on it, you know, seeing if I could actually play melodies up there, you know. You know, I would see if I could play giant steps and not go below like C. You know, and it doesn't always sound that good, but you get the idea. You know, just that's
hard work.
that's hard work. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, this is something I've really discovered over the years too. Is that I mean, I think, you know, there are very many talented people in all kinds of different ways, and we all have our own strengths and weaknesses as musicians and things. You know, so. And it definitely helps to, you know, to have some natural talent. Obviously, you know, it can get you in the door, and also it can make it fun to work on, you know, if you're getting somewhere. But really, it's all about following through and doing the work, you know. Because I mean, I can, you know, think of a bunch of people that when I came to New York, that yeah, they're really promising young musicians, you know. And some of them, you know, really didn't ever do that much. And then some other ones are people whose names I'm sure you know, really developed into a thing. So I've, you know, definitely a believer in work, whatever that is, you know. And of course it's fun too. I probably wouldn't have put in so much time, except it's fun, and also, you know, it would just drive me nuts. Like it was something I knew I could do, maybe, you know, and I just couldn't be satisfied until I can get that, you know, can get that sound. And it continues that way. Both the drive and the frustration from time to time continues, you know. And I've been around my heroes enough now, long enough to see that it's the same with them too. You know, like, you know, Herbie Hancock is still, you know, sometimes, you know, when there's someone play something and man, what's that? You know, and really like want to know, and you know, one reason he plays that way. His mind is open and he wants to learn. As far as what to work on, of course, that's always a huge thing. There's so many avenues. There's so much. There's so the jazz language now has been evolving for a long time now, and a lot of people have put a lot of energy into taking it in different directions. It seems like there's so much information to take in, and also just the way that we live now, and you can check out anything on YouTube at any time. In a way, I'm kind of glad it wasn't like that when I first started. But it was overload. I had like maybe 2 or 3 John Coltrane records, and I listened to them 1,000 times each. Instead of one performance, and then it's like getting deep inside something small and manageable. I think that's often more useful in terms of learning than getting too much at one time. I think I spent a year probably basically just listening to Bird and trying to figure that out. I mean, listening to other things for pleasure too. Stevie Wonder, Rite of Spring, and other music too. But as far as I can, saxophone player, like I really went through kind of intense phases of checking out individual players. And I think that's an important way to learn. I think the best way to learn to play the jazz language, is by listening and trying to copy. Get the notes, of course. Understand what the harmony is. Why the real thing is to understand why is the soloist choosing those notes? Why do they work? How do they fit the harmony? But what is it saying? Where is it going? And also just the sound. The sound and the articulation, the rhythmic feeling. So this is something that you really can't get from the written page. You can see what the notes are, which can be useful. But the essential information, in a way, the sound, the articulation, understanding the logic, is kind of a different thing. And it always seemed to me that it was best to learn that by listening over and over again and trying to copy. Just like we learn our first language. You're not thinking about verbs, nouns. You're just copying what the sound is, and you end up with a more natural way of speaking or playing, as the case may. So as a first step, I think that's a huge thing. Just the listening and copying, and I still do that sometimes, and I'll play along with all kinds of stuff and just imagine what it felt like to improvise that or to play that. Not necessarily just saxophone players, either. Trumpet players, pianists, tabla players. Different kinds of music too.
Classical music.
Classical music, definitely. Yeah, just putting on some Berg, and trying to play along with it and harmonically make some kind of sense out of it, can be kind of a challenge. I remember once I tried to transcribe like the, I forget exactly what it's called, Berg piano sonata, maybe. It's a solo piano piece, and it's beautiful, but I think I got about a minute and a half into it. Okay. I think I should spend my time some other way. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things to practice. I don't really know where to begin. But just finding like whatever you're interested in, whatever feels kind of fun and productive to work on. I'd say just do that because a lot of it is like there are many different angles that can work, many different approaches that can work. it's just a matter of actually doing whatever your natural path is, you know, and just exploring everything you can within that. You know, this is another thing that I feel like I've learned from working with my heroes. You know, it's like, okay, you know, somebody like Dave Collins. I mean, he'll practice. He's very methodical. You know, he'll work on some harmonic idea or some rhythmic pattern. You know, he'll break it down. He'll write down all these, you know, and he's gotten to a certain level of playing, you know, in that way because of how he's worked on things, you know. And then, like working with Paul Motion, it was a completely different thing, you know. It's like he had, at some point in his career, I think he tried to forget any kind of technique at all. Like it was, if you saw him playing, he looked like, you know, he was like a little kid sitting down at the drums for the first time. I think that's how he wanted to feel, you know. So he was going on his aesthetic instincts, and that was his main focus, was, you know, getting rid of any kind of, you know, thing you could analyze and just going with the feeling of it. Now, of course, you know, he wasn't able to do that. I mean, it's not like somebody who actually never played the drums, they wouldn't be able to do that. He had the control. I mean, he'd studied rudiments. He's, you know, spent years listening to Kenny Clark, Big Sid Catlett, Max Roach. You know, that was his, where he was coming from. But after kind of mastering that, then he let that go. You know, so like just a completely different approach than Dave, and you end up with a very different kind of music. You know, but it also works. You know. And there are many more examples I could give of this. You know, different paths that people take, different things they get interested in, affect the music they make. But the whole thing is, as I was saying, just following through on whatever that is. You know, so that's really the hard part, right? Is to find what that is for ourselves. You know, and for me, I've tried to go down a lot of different roads, and some of them maybe ended up feeling like a dead end, you know. But at least now I know that because I've tried to go down it. Yeah.
Maybe you could describe a little about your process to find material for your projects, what kind of songs to play and how that goes for you.
Yeah. I try to have a sound in mind for each project that I'm doing. You know, like I mean, the underground band, when I started that band, I mean, you know, just the instrumentation alone, of course, made it a little different. Like the Rhodes as the bass, guitar and drums, you know, much more electric sort of setting, and I knew I wanted to use, you know, more kind of funk with rhythms, you know, and even more than that, I was thinking about the actual musicians involved. You know, I was thinking, I mean, normally the writing really gets going after I know who I want to have in the band. You know, so I wasn't just writing for those instruments either. I was writing for Adam Rogers and for Craig Taborn and for Nate Smith, knowing, having spent time with them, and you know, knowing their musical language. And it kind of took a while. You know, it often takes a while. I think the first book of music I brought in for Underground, you know, maybe we ended up using one or two of those tunes, but I ended up throwing a lot of that away and bringing in a bunch of new stuff as I heard what the band was. You know, for a project like the Imaginary Cities thing that I did, which incorporates the members of Underground, but it's a large ensemble. You know, it's like string quartet, vibes, piano, guitar, two basses, drums. You know, I didn't have that luxury of bringing in a whole bunch of material and we just play through a bunch of. You know, I had to have it ready to go. You know, like large ensemble music. And I really did agonize, or I threw a lot away, you know, before I got to what we ended up actually recording. You know, but it was basically a sound. Again, it was like I just imagined that sound, and I was, again, imagining Craig and Nate and Adam and Scott Colley and Steve Efron and Steve Nelson, those individual players in what I was doing. The band that I'm here with now, this is a new quartet that we're going to be recording, and I've been trying to conceive what this will be. It's basically an acoustic jazz quartet. It's piano, bass, and drums. So it has that sound, but I don't want it to be. I kind of have. It's hard to explain. Actually, if you could explain it all, then you don't need to make music. It's the music is what it's about. But something that is, of course, related to all the great jazz musicians that we've listened to for many years, but completely trying to look forward, and not only backwards. At times I use the sampler with this band, which I kind of like, because it just takes it sonically in a whole other. It just seems like another world. And at first when I did it, I thought, yeah, I don't know if that can work. It's a little, because it's so out of that context. But then I started thinking, well, you don't ever get anything new without a little bit of a kind of a shock, So for me, it's a little shocking, but I've kind of gotten into it more and more. And I'm also figuring out how to use it, it's just how to balance it with the band and when to bring it in. And, it's like learning another instrument.
Who does that?
What's that?
Who does that, the sampler?
Who does that? Me. Yeah. Yeah, and I just it's all samples like that I made at home. Like me playing different instruments, running them backwards, and, layering different things about just the core stuff into Pro Tools or whatever, and then mess with it, and then record it into the sampler, and mix them all up. So there's not really much like source material
Well,
from
there
other
is
records.
something like that in previous CDs.
I did use that, yes.
Traveling Mercies?
Traveling Mercies, that was my first try, and then I never used it live. I kind of chickened out. I couldn't figure out what to do with it. Part of it is that the technology is getting better. Like the sampler I'm using now, it just has so much more memory. Like I had the problem that there were only about 3 or 4 different things I could do, and then it was just like this loop of something going on over and over and over again. It got kind of boring, But at least now I can get enough sounds that it's not the same exact group of sounds every time I use it. So the technology itself has kind of helped, along with, I guess, my I don't know, I'm not as afraid to do it. It's a nice thing about getting older. Try it. Yeah, so it's hard to say exactly what it is, but I end up writing a lot of music and not using it all is what often ends up happening. If I write 30 tunes, maybe we'll end up with 16 or 17 in the book. Or I'll revise the stuff I have, as I hear what's going on. And I'll bring in new stuff based on what worked, or what we need. So okay, we're kind of missing a certain medium tempo thing. So it almost gets to be more of like an assignment. Like, okay, we need this kind of tune. The thing about writing, I've always found too, is just just like any other thing in music, the more you do it, the better you get at it. Like if you're sitting around waiting for some inspiration, you could be waiting a long time and just have a blank piece of paper at the end of it. And it's much more productive just to write something. Just write something and work with it and see what you can do with it. And if it doesn't sound good, then don't use it. No harm done. You just learned a little bit for the next one. And I find that if I leave the faucet on in that kind of way, just keep writing, more good things do end up, sort of popping out. Something that I know is really going to work. But maybe there's 5 tunes that I that were frustrating and I couldn't figure out what to do with. But then that sixth one works. Well, you know, if you do that a lot, you end up with some tunes you really like. You know, so that would be my advice for writing too. Is just write a lot. You know, it's kind of hard for me to even go back and remember, you know, exactly how it felt 20, 25 years ago, you know, when I was like a young musician, had just moved to New York. I mean, so many avenues I hadn't been down yet that now I've been down, you know. I don't feel like my process has changed. I just feel like all that experience, you know, has, you know, managed to pay off in the long run, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. You know, you can look back and go, wow, I really did come a long way from that to here, but it's, you know, didn't feel like it. It just felt like one day at a time, trying to, you know, get as good as you can. Yeah.
When you learn a new song, how do you work on the chord changes? How do you learn?
Yeah, that's a good question. I tend to use the piano a lot. I feel like that's a big help to me, both in writing and in improvising too. To look at things from that standpoint. I usually don't write B-flat parts out for myself. I don't really like reading B-flat parts. So, you know, if it's really something fast, it can be helpful to not have to transpose it when you're reading it. But for some reason, I like thinking in concert key like the rest of the band. You know, it's hard to explain why. I know some other musicians are like this too. I know, you know, Joe Henderson was like that, for example. I don't know. The piano is, you know, really, really helpful to get the architecture. If I'm looking at a tune, you know, and what the changes are, I'll often spend a lot of time before I play it on the saxophone even, just going through the changes a lot. I mean, I wish it was, you know, if it was a piano, I'd kind of show you what the process was. Because I've spent a lot of time working on standards just on the piano, sometimes more than the horn, you know. And it gets me to understand the harmony in a deeper way. Thinking about voicings, you know, and the sounds of voicings. I mean, this is what I use constantly in my playing, you know. I mean, maybe what I'll actually, you know, play, because you can only play just one note at a time, you know. You know, it's this fast run of notes, but I'm thinking if, you know, if I had the keyboard, I just, you know, could just play what the sound is. And I end up working with those sounds a lot, you know, and that's how maybe I can generate some of the, you know, faster groups of notes that I do, is that I'm not thinking of them as just individual notes. I'm thinking of it as a chord, you know, and not just a, you know, a vague chord like F7, but like, you know, that is that voicing. You know, and that's just the simplest way of doing it to it. But it could also be, you know, what was it again? Right. You know, there's all different ways to articulate that same sound. But if you don't kind of have that sound, then you can't get to that next level. So that's something I do a lot. I mean, you could hear that when I was, you know, when I was just playing. I mean, maybe I'm thinking, you know, but I might play some. Some of the time. I mean, that's like one approach that I use. And I find that that's really, really helpful. I try to memorize things as soon as I can. I'm not a big fan of, I mean, I'm not terribly methodical, actually. I would say it's a lot of, working on ideas and not being careful to write everything down. It might be good if I did that. And I have had, if there's something I really can't remember, if it's just too complicated or I think I'm going to forget, then I'll write something down. But I prefer to have to generate these things from my head, because you learn things in a deeper way when you're not reading them, I think. And it's much more helpful, instead of reading. To be able to transpose that in your head and do all those kind of things without reading it, And then I would set up exercises. I mean, this isn't really specifically for tunes, but just for getting facility, not just going up and down in half steps, but also different intervals, Whole steps. Minor thirds. Major thirds, So you can get around. That's like developing the tools so that you can, when you run into something that you want to do like that, the fingers will know what to do. Because there's no way to avoid, muscle memory. It's like you have to. You always want to be coming up with, completely new, fresh ideas all the time. But your muscles do have to know where the notes are. And I mean, the ultimate thing would be to practice every conceivable group of notes, and then just use them when they occur to you. The human brain doesn't seem to work that way. At least mine doesn't. But it helps if I approach it that way, and it helps if I approach these things as ideas that I can use in different ways, rather than licks that I know work over a tune. I really try not to think that way. I try and think in terms of like melodic development. If I'm working on a tune, another thing I'll do is to try and set up like motives, see how long I can work with an idea. Like it's over Laura. But just even as an exercise, like how much can you use a simple bit of material? This is one thing as improvisers. I mean, in any one solo, we use so much material. I mean, if you look at any classical piece, it's just a Mahler symphony. I mean, it may go on for an hour and a half, but the amount of melodic and harmonic material is actually pretty small in a way. There's a lot of things done with a smaller amount of material. And I find that this can help bring unity to what you're doing. If you can figure out a way to use that. And again, you have to know the changes. You have to be able to get around the horn, in order to get to that level. But that always seemed to be more interesting. That was the way, I mean, that can be interesting forever, because that's more related to telling a story. you know, and it's like you have a character or something. It starts here, and then things happen to that character, and meets other characters and interacts. And, you know, I mean, it gets closer to the heart of, for me, you know, what art is about, what it can do, the kind of stories you can tell in music, you know. Of course, when I'm actually playing in a live situation, playing a concert, you know, I'm trying to forget all of this and not think about anything at all. But these things that I have thought about and worked on, you know, when I'm not performing, those definitely affect what I do when I am there. Yeah, so I mean, these are you know, some of the techniques, I'd say. Yeah, if there's a tune that's unfamiliar, definitely learn on the piano, learn like lots of different, you know, voicing. Figure out ways to get from one chord to another, you know, using common tones or some kind of leading, like voice leading. You know, think about chords not as like a fixed thing, you know, like, okay, if you see B minor 7, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, it can be, you know, or it can be, you know, there's all kinds of sounds that are B minor 7, and they also are not as, you know, not as important in isolation as they are the connections between them. You know, figuring out ways to get from one chord to another. Like in Laura, I mean, that's just the melody of Laura shows a good way of doing that. It starts on the 9th of the A minor, concert A minor, you know, and then goes to the sharp 5 of the dominant, which is a half step below, you know. You know, basically what you've got is, you know, and with the bass note, which again I can't play at the same time, but you know, you can, it's like this melody that goes down, and the way I played the bass line, I made sure that I was going up. So I was getting, like, you know, the parallel, I mean, the contrary motion, you know, that the bass line was going up and the melody was going down, you know. And that's like a very kind of classic one, I'm thinking of voicings and transposing them kind of from a piano, all the notes at once idea into kind of a more arpeggio kind of an idea. But also, you know, keeping those melodies in mind at the top, you know. Yeah, it's hard to kind of explain, but you hear what I'm, again, music is often more difficult to explain.
And do you sing what you play?
Sing? I mean, some of that would be very hard for me to sing. I don't have the best voice, but you know, yeah, I think it is important to think of it that way. I mean, for one thing, that's one of the beautiful things about the saxophone, is how much of a voice it is. It's really being like a human voice. I also like in a case like that, you know, knowing the words to the song and what it's about. That kind of helps me, you know. Of course, my own music, a lot of music I play, you know, doesn't have any words, doesn't even necessarily have a definite association, but maybe, you know, that means that every time I play it, maybe I can think of something else. You know, singing has helped me also. Like, there was a point, I remember feeling frustrated in my playing that I felt too stuck in bebop, you know, and I was trying to find a way out. And I was imagining a sound, but I didn't have it quite developed in my head what it was, you know. So I just tried singing the rhythm, singing kind of scat singing what it was, and that helped me figure out what I wanted to work on, you know. So instead of just more straight kind of bebop, you know, and I'm not going to make any attempt to nail the pitches because it's not going to happen, you know. You know, straight kind of bebop. And I was like, well, what am I hearing that's different? You know, and it was like groupings of fives, putting triplets maybe in different places, just, you know, other kinds of things. It'd be like still related to bebop, you know, but with a few other things in there. So, you know. You know, not really thinking specifically of a form or anything, but it's like, yeah, okay, that's what I'm hearing. That's what it is, without all these buttons to push, and, you know, that helped me get that out of the way, to at least know more specifically what it was I had in mind. And then I had to figure out how to play those things, you know, how to go from, you know, what I had been practicing for years, you know, bebop. You know, to also be incorporating these other ideas, you know. Like this, you still hear the bebop thing, but then some of those other kind of things in there. And I had to find out, you know, well, what is that? If I'm hearing you know, what is that? What can I do? You know, I had to find notes that would fit the rhythm. But it was coming from the rhythm first for me, you know, that's where I started developing those ideas from. So that's one kind of specific thing, you know, singing the ideas first helped me to do it. Also, I mean, you know, being able to sing in terms of this kind of related to singing, just ear training, just being able to grab what the sound is with the pitches. I mean, you know, it is hugely important, you know, that you think of it from that angle. It's hard to explain what I mean, but, you know, like, instead of, again, relying on the piece of music that says A minor 7, it's like, you know, imagine that you don't have that piece of music and you're just hearing a band, you know, maybe you're playing with someone and there's the sound, and how do you react immediately, you know, not because of what it says to do, but because of the sound, you know. That's a better place to come from, I mean, I don't actually have perfect pitch, you know, and I think I've kind of used that, that everything is kind of relative for me, you know. It means that when I do just hear a sound, I don't necessarily know what key it's in. It might take me a couple notes to figure out what it is. But once I know where I am, you know, then I've worked enough on, you know, different voicings and different ways to express things that I can usually find, you know, what it is that's going on pretty fast, you know. And I'd say that would be a useful exercise. Like just put on some recording and try singing along with it, and see if you can find things that make sense with the harmony, you know, and then try and play that way, you know. Think of it from that angle. That, you know, it's like you're singing, you just have a horn. It's always, you're always trying to get all this stuff, you know, the mouthpiece, the reed, the keys, to not be an obstacle between your thoughts about what's possible and then bringing it out into the physical world. I mean, there's always, you know, it's never perfect, like everything else in the physical world. It's like it comes out always, both not as perfect as you would hope, but actually in the end probably more beautiful than it could be if it was perfect, you know. So you're always looking for the perfection, and you always have to kind of accept, like, okay, you know, these little things that get lost in translation are actually maybe part of the beauty of it. That's, you know, yeah, sort of another subject. I have a tendency to do that. Yes.
Hello, Chris. To you, what is the system for search the sound personal?
For getting this personal sound?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it can evolve naturally. That's the way I like to look at it. You know, you listen to a lot of different players and you copy them and you play like them, you know, and you get ideas from them, you know, but not just one person. Like you know, after you do it for a while, like, you know, see if you can play like Lester Young and Sonny Rollins and Cannonball, and whoever, or when you have just a wide range of these references, and also not just saxophone players, again, less music. And you study different things, you know, it just kind of, it evolves naturally. I find usually if I decide, oh, I'm going to do something that's different, you know, usually that makes the whole thing narrower. Like I'm deciding on an identity. Like you know, it's like I don't think that's the right approach. I think we all have an identity. We just have it, and it's a way of. It's more about the way that you process information and the way that you think. And you know, it's personal stuff, like, you know, just how, you know, how tall you are, how heavy you are, you know, just the way you move, the way you walk, you know, it's all in there already. So you don't really have to worry about it. The thing you have to do is to not cut it off, I think, is to, you know, go with it, don't be too self-conscious. You know, there is a certain amount of courage when you get to a certain level. I think you do have to have the courage to go, you know, all these people, they really like how this person plays, and maybe that's what I should be doing because everybody likes that person, you know. And you do have to throw that away and go, well, okay, that's how they play. It's, you know, it's beautiful, but I kind of hear something else, and I'd rather, you know, that's not where I'm at, so I want to do something else. It does take some courage to do that, and you think people are going to go, well, yeah, I really don't like that as much, you know, as that other guy, and that can happen, but it's, you know, but in the end, you find it's worth it. I mean, it's kind of interesting to me, just how powerful, like, one personality can be in art in different places. I mean, you know, think about how many people tried to copy Charlie Parker. Like, I mean, it's music bugs. I mean, it's amazing, but it's not the only way to play, you know. But it got everyone's attention so, you know, so much, that it was such a focus, that a lot of people never really did forge an individual identity, you know. But there's a place for that too. I mean, I think, you know, we're definitely richer in a world that, you know, with all of us contributing in whatever kind of way, you know. I mean, of course, I'm glad there's Charlie Parker. I'm also very glad that there's Sonny Stitt, you know, who maybe, you know, no one would say he's as original as Bird, but he sounded beautiful doing it. You know, there's a place for that too. It's just, again, it's just finding your place and being kind of comfortable with it. Are we? How are we doing?
Yeah, we are almost ready.
Yeah.
Si alguien más tiene algo más que preguntar.
If there's another question, I'd be happy to. Yeah.
How do you work on sound?
On sound, yeah, that's so big. I mean, sound. I've always felt, you know, that's the most important thing. Before you hear someone's harmonic knowledge or, you know, ability to do all that stuff, it's just the sound. And when I say sound, I mean it's the actual sound of the horn, but it's also, you know, it's the articulation. It's just the presence, which is it's hard to define. You know, but it's everything. If that's not working, if I don't feel comfortable in that, I can't play anything. I don't feel like I can't do anything at all. You know, nothing connects. So I have to feel comfortable about sound, and it's something I've been working on for years and years, and I continue to work on. I mean, as far as just the physical aspects of getting it, a lot of it for me has been trial and error. You know, just seeing what works. And in the end, you find what works is the things that they tell you. You know, stand up straight, use these big muscles that have some power as much as you can, have as little tension everywhere else as you can. You know, and long tones. You know, I mean. You know, if I spend like, the neighbors complain, that's what happens when we do that. But, they really,
That's the guy, no?
huh? Is it actually,
Probably working.
who knows? All right. It's the ghost of Charlie Parker. Yeah, that's right. I mean, if I spend like a minute or two on each one of those, I mean, just really. You know, for a few breaths, and just as long as I can hold it, play it, and do that all the way up the overtone series, up to, you know, high altissimo Ds, you know. The horn feels so small and easy to play at the end of that. You know, it's something I don't always do. I don't always have the time to do. You know, especially in now life. You know, when life gets busy, you're like scrambling for 15 minutes to practice. You know, like, but it's helped a lot. Both being able to play in the altissimo, that's one thing, but also just having a good sound on the whole range of the horn. You know, being able to play melodies using harmonics. You know. That really helps. And yeah, it's just a lot of trial and error and a lot of not being satisfied and keep going further.
And for the tempo, how do you work?
Oh, for like time, yeah. Well, I'd say, see, after sound, I'd say rhythmic feeling is the next thing. I used to practice a lot with the metronome on 2 and 4, you know, just playing standards like that. You know, being able to play something real simple and really in the pocket, you know, that gets you much further than a bunch of fancy stuff not in the pocket. You know what I mean? If you can just, you know, even just a few notes, just be able to play a blues, you know. But you know, that's something, I've spent a lot of time practicing just being able to do that. So then when I am doing, you know, it has that in it too. I mean, so that it can make sense musically, you know. And of course, sometimes you make it, sometimes you don't. But if you at least have that, just the fundamental things. And I'm a big believer in, get the basic things really, really strong. And oftentimes that's all you need, And then when you break out the fancy stuff, then it's some icing on the cake. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think about the mouthpiece and wrist? You make something special?
I think you should avoid them at all times. No, I don't know. For many years, I've been using links, usually either a rubber link or a metal link, usually a metal link. That's, I don't know, 10, 15 years. With occasional, I try other things for a few weeks and then go back to it. These, this is an old, it's like somewhere between a 7-star and an 8. These reeds are, Dario Jazz Select, Too Hard Unfiled. It takes so long to say. Too Hard Unfiled. So it's pretty medium setup. It's not super resistant or super soft. I found that it fits, Yeah, I mean, the things about these links that I like, they're not easy in a way. They're not easy to use. When the reed's not working, they get all messed up and just nothing works at all. But when they are working, you can get a lot of different sounds. If you think of all the people that play these, it's like Paul Gonzalez and Train and, Ben Webster was playing a link, John Gilmore. There's all kinds of, there's so many different sounds you can get out of a link. That's what I like about it, is the flexibility. And I find that whenever I try different combinations of mouthpieces and reeds, I do learn something about the saxophone and how it works and how the sound works. But I always end up coming back to kind of a similar thing. And even if I didn't, it would probably end up kind of sounding the same. sing? Well, yeah, I started when I was 10.
Do you like when you think when you're listening?
What's that?
Do you like when you do listening?
Do I like when I hear myself?
Mhm.
I learn a lot. You know, I actually do that a lot at home. I record a lot of what I practice to listen back to, whatever, kind of thing. Yeah.
It's difficult.
It's difficult. Yeah, you have to get used to it. I'm kind of used to it now because I've done it so much. Yeah, but you always hear what you wish you'd done differently. It's very difficult to judge yourself, and that's what we all have to do. I mean, you kind of have to. You have to be your own doctor. Say, okay, what's wrong with the patient? Well, I think the patient needs to practice the low register. Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's very useful to have a teacher that can help you, but it's jazz. It's your expression. It's improvisation. So no one can really tell you if it's right or wrong. It's only you that's like, is that the sound or not? And sometimes it's easy to get caught up in things that don't matter that much.
On your right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's always best if you can listen to yourself as if it's somebody else. Just pretend it's somebody else, so that you can maybe have a better view. Again, like, okay, what is this hypothetical person? What should they work on? And try and forget that it's you. And then it can be very, very useful. Yeah, but I mean, it's extremely useful. I do it a lot of recording of myself, and I do it back, and trying to be honest with myself about, okay, that's just not it. But also, when it is okay, not getting hung up on, oh, one note, I missed that one. It's like that really doesn't matter. Or okay, to read church for a second, like, yeah, it bugs me like crazy, and everybody else is. I don't even notice it. So much of what I end up liking or not liking about my own performances is, you can always hear the intention. I think even non-musicians, when they hear an improviser, if they're paying attention in a certain way, they don't necessarily hear a bunch of things that we might pay attention to in terms of the saxophone, but the intention, I think, is always pretty clear, and where the personal strengths and weaknesses are, you really can't hide. Which is one reason music is valuable, I think, is it's a tool for everyone to get to this good place, but it means that when you do hear yourself play, you have to say, okay, well, what am I afraid of? What am I dealing with? What am I not dealing with? At whatever level. It's not about like if you're a virtuoso, if you're a beginner. It's kind of doesn't matter. Everybody's dealing with that same thing, and there can be a situation where there's someone who, yeah, this is a total virtuoso, and there's something that you go, yeah, I just don't feel anything from it, And on the other side, there could be someone who really doesn't play that well, but you just get something from it. I mean, that's how I always felt, Fela, terrible saxophone player, really bad. But the whole vibe is so strong, that I don't really think about that, So it's, at the end of the day, that's what's important. Now, I mean, I have other things that I'm trying to do, and I need the things I want to express. Yeah, I need a certain amount of technique and flexibility to do what I imagine, but I don't think it's the only way to play or make good music. I mean, also just, if I think about singers, I mean, Bob Dylan, no one would say he's Caruso, but he, but he communicates a certain thing. And you know, you really do have to put in some work somewhere. If you check him out, for example, I mean, that guy, he knows a ton about like folk songs. You know, he seems like, from what I know, he's one of these guys. I mean, he probably knows 1,000 American folk songs and has all these references in his. You know, he is a virtuoso at a certain thing. It's not the singing, you know, but it fits the aesthetic, you know. And again, that's related to again the thing I started out with about any approach in work is just following through on whatever it is. You know. Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about improvising and practicing.
Yeah.
Do you ever just free improvise without any set concept or key or idea of a melody to start with, and then just follow the music and play what you feel
Mm-hmm.
it wants or where it wants to go, like a path, like going through the
Sure.
woods,
Yeah.
and in that way discover what works and what doesn't work?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, do you ever do that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's
What are your
like, you know,
feelings about that
playing-
in relation to
playing the-
performance?
Yeah. I mean, that's like playing free, you know. I mean,
Yeah, but I'm not talking about free jazz in the sense of like, you know, what some people conceive of as being.
well, that's an interesting point, right? Because when you hear free jazz, it's almost like it's not free anymore because there's certain things you expect from free jazz. It's not, you know, it's not completely free if that's the case. It's like if you expect that, you know, free jazz has to mean, you know, I mean, it can, but it can also be, you know. Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot of points in the set, you know. Often some of my favorite times when I'm playing a set with my band, because I end up doing a fair amount of tunes that do have a form. I like playing with forms a lot, not all the time. But I also like having a form to get away from, you know. And sometimes in between tunes, like setting up the next tune, is, you know, that's when we're really playing free. And maybe, you know, we have somewhere to go because we know we're going into this other thing. But we don't really know how we're going to get there or what's, you know, what's going to happen.
I mean, something like an band or something during the
Not,
during
yeah,
the song.
or not even that. Like even before a band,
Okay.
you know, just really playing textures, you know. And I mean, there have been, you know, some other groups that I've worked with. I mean, a fair amount of underground, you know, believe it or not. I mean, there was almost always a groove, but a lot of the forms were pretty non-existent. You know, there's a lot of free playing. Again, you wouldn't necessarily, because it often had a backbeat, you know, but it didn't have to. It wasn't written into the tune. It was just how we chose to play it. Yeah, free. Like, what exactly is free?
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to define. 'Cause
I guess maybe I'm talking more like outside of the changes, or not
Mhm.
being locked in by the changes, you know, going back to
Right.
the idea when Jackie McLean and people like that started playing, you know, outside, you know,
Right.
going
Right.
outside, but still very melodic.
Right, right. Well, that's sort of a question too. Is it going to be that you're playing free, thinking about some changes, or really not having any change? I mean, you know, and I mean, these are all things that I've explored and will continue to explore. I mean, yeah, you know, sometimes, yeah, I'll break out the horn and just, okay, shapes,
Yeah.
you know. And there's never, you know, you could always go back later and say, well, this is what the tonality is. And oftentimes you end up kind of in a tonality anyway, you know, but yeah, shapes, I mean. You know, with the tempo. I mean. I mean, it's kind of interesting to me now when I listen to like, Shape of, The Shape of Jazz.
Jazz.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
Change of the Century, like those early Ornette records. Just how bluesy they sound.
They sound totally straight and
Totally
melodic.
straight ahead, yeah, beautiful. I mean, not nearly as out as what I just did. I mean, it's much more rooted in kind of blues. It doesn't sound out at all. I mean,
What was a big deal?
yeah, I know. It's almost like, well, but it was, there wasn't a real form to a lot of it. That was already, and it wasn't polished somehow. If you're used to Bird, it sounds kind of rough. But yeah, very, very accessible and incredible. I mean, it really holds up. For me, listening to those records now, wow, it's beautiful. So it's another thing. I mean, again, like I was saying, the language of jazz is. I don't even know what jazz is at this point. And I prefer it that way. But I would like to for it not to have any boundaries. Or it's fuzzy. Like maybe it's a way of approaching things, but it's not a. That's the strength of it, I think. And that's one reason. Also like we're here in Spain. Barcelona. Right? Like, what is it from the culture here that you can bring to the music? That's exciting. I mean, and that's been going on for many years now. It's not anything new. It's like wherever jazz goes, it ends up absorbing influences from wherever it can, and it makes the whole thing better, so any limits on what it's supposed to be, what it's not supposed to be. I mean, I obviously come at it from my point of view, which is listening to Bird and Johnny Hodges, and I grew up in South Carolina. That's where I'm from, and I definitely use that, and I encourage everyone to use whatever you've got that inspires you, to make whatever feels vital to you, because that's what it needs. I mean, that's why the music, we were actually discussing this in the car, how like basically from the very beginning, people have been saying jazz is dying, like since it was born, and 100 years later, we're here, I don't really see any lack of interest in the music. It's like always, it's not ever going to be commercially maybe, sellable in a certain way, by its very nature. I mean, it's almost anti that, as much as we'd like to see more people into it, as much as we'd all wish there were more venues to play and an easier way to make a living doing it. That's what's really important for us on the ground. But the music itself, I don't see it's going anywhere. Or that it's leaving. It is going. It's going everywhere.
Yeah.
I remember being. I mean, this isn't exactly related, but it was a good answer. I was out with Paul Motion years ago. We were in Italy, and an interviewer, he asked Paul, so where is jazz going? So he takes out the itinerary. He's like, well, tomorrow it's going to Naples. The next day it's going to Vienna.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.